After watching this game, you are at least going to learn one thing, that to never give up. Play till the very end. This game is from the Vergani Cup 2022, round number 8, between Hans Niemann versus Milton Panzar. Milton Panzar is very young, already international master, having a rating of 2400, and Hans Niemann is well-known grandmaster, having a rating of 2600. This game is actually so interesting that after watching this game, you are definitely going to learn that to never give up, to play till the very end. So let's check it out. So Milton Panzar with the white pieces started out the game with 1d4, and Hans Niemann with the black pieces replied with knight to f6. We have knight to f3, so we have the Indian game on the board, and now we have e6 by black. So Hans is simply saying to white that I'm ready if you want to go for the c4 variation. I can simply go for playing the queen's gambit. But Milton decided to play the g3 variation in the Indian game. And now we have b5 by Hans. The idea of playing b5 in this position is, there are two ideas. First of all, to develop the bishop on b7, because white idea is also to develop the bishop on g2. And the second idea is to play b5, controlling the square of c4, so that now white can no longer play c4. See, b5 looks a very logical move from the black side. Bishop g2, bishop to b7, short castle, and now we have d5, closing the center, and yeah, taking control of the center. And now we have a4 by white. So white is saying that okay, you have already pushed b5, so which makes your queen side like overextended structure. So I'm going to simply attack your b5 pawn, which will eventually make the c and the a pawn weak. Here Hans simply pushes his pawn to b4. We have c4, and now we have n pass in. Knight c3, bishop to e7, bishop f4, and now we have castle. So basically in this position, the c pawn looks terribly weak. The white idea could be to play rook c1, knight b5, putting pressure on the pawn on c7. But on the other hand, b2 pawn looks also weak, and perhaps there could be some pressure on the a4 pawn as well. Black can also go for playing c5 at some point, but there would be dark squares weaknesses in the future. We have rook to c1 by white. At the place of playing rook c1, a slightly much better move would have been to play queen to b3, attacking the bishop on b7, so that after something like queen to c8, white can now go for playing rook c1, and now there would be some pressure on the c file. But okay, rook c1 was also definitely a fine move. Idea is to play knight b5. There would be triple attack on the c7 pawn, and here black simply played a6, simply controlling this b5 square so that there would be no knight b5, and now the c7 pawn looks pretty safe. And now we have queen to b3, hitting the bishop, and now we have rook to a7 by black. Very unusual move, but it is a completely fine move in the position. The rook cannot be attacked by any piece, and the rook is simply defending the bishop. Knight to e5, knight d7, we have a knight trade, and now we have a5. The idea of playing a5, white wants to play knight to a4, and there could be some ideas with a knight to c5. So black came up with a very logical move in the position, which is bishop to c6. I like this move very much. There are many ideas of playing bishop to c6. First of all, covering this knight a4 idea, stopping all this knight a4 ideas. Second, now black idea could be to play rook to b7, hitting the queen and the pawn. And it also minimize the problem on the c7 pawn, because now the bishop is on c6, defended by the queen. So after playing bishop to c6, white simply played queen to c2. The idea is to move the knight and putting the pressure on the bishop. So Hans simply played rook to b8, simply taking over the b file and putting pressure on the b2 pawn. We have b3, and now we have h6, so that there would be no backline mates in the future. And also there could be some ideas of playing g5 in the future. So here white simply played knight to a4. Knight a4 was a fine move, but after bishop a4, ba4, the pawn structure is not so good. At the place of playing knight a4, a much better move would have been to play knight to e4 in this position. Not so hard to see, but it's like at least you have to find that move. The idea of playing knight e4 in this position is basically, if black tries to capture the knight, then we can simply go for capturing the bishop. And after something like queen trade, after knight d6, because capturing the pawn doesn't feel right because you are already losing the c7 pawn. Knight d6. Here we comes with rook to c1, and after bishop g5, bishop trade, rook takes, and basically in this position it's a fine position, it's an equal position, and white is very comfortable in this position. So knight e4 would have been a slight better move, but knight a4 was also a fine move. Bishop a4, ba4, and now we have rook to b4. So black simply jumped up with the rook, hitting both the pawns on a4 as well as on d4. Queen to c6, asking for a queen trade, and now we have bishop to d6, a very nice move by Hans, simply just removing all the pressure on the c7 pawn. Bishop to d2, and now we have rook into a4, nice move. You cannot capture the rook because the queen is protecting it, and the queen cannot be captured because the knight is protecting it. So we simply have e3 by white, just making the pawn structure very good. Rook to a2, hitting the bishop, and now we have rook to d1. Bishop a3, hitting the rook, rook to c2. We have a queen trade, and in this position, Hans played rook to b2, which was not a good move from the black side. A much better move at the place of playing rook to b2 was to play knight to d7. Very hard to find, but this is the right move. The idea of playing knight d7 in this position is to play knight to b8. And after something like bishop to f1, putting pressure on the pawn on a6, now here black can simply come up with knight to b8, hitting the rook on c6, also protecting the pawn on a6. And after rook to c3, we can simply pull up bishop back to d6, and if you try to move your rook, I can simply play knight d7, and your bishop is attacked, your pawn is attacked, and black is simply better. So knight d7 would have been a slight better move, but rook b2, and which allows basically white to play bishop to f1, and now the a6 pawn is dead. So Hans simply played his rook to b7 because he was thinking like the a6 pawn is already going to fall. White simply captured the pawn, and in this position black could at least play rook a7, like at least holding this c7 pawn, but he simply like didn't want it to repeat the position, so he simply played rook to b3, and here white simply captured the c7 pawn, and now in this position white is completely winning because he's having the bishop pair, the a pawn is passed pawn, white is already winning. Knight e4, bishop to e1, and now we have rook to b1 asking for a rook trade. We have bishop to e2 by white, rook trade, and now we have rook to b1. So black is simply hitting the bishop, and it looks like perhaps black is going to have a piece. But here white simply came up with an excellent and a natural move, which is playing a6 in the position. And after playing a6, it doesn't matter if you try to go for capturing the bishop. If you try to capture the bishop, then I can simply play a7. Rook takes bishop, and after king g2, stopping the queen is impossible, and it's completely winning for white. So that's why rook into d1 was not possible. So Hans simply came up with an, you can say, uncommon and a very nice move, you can say, bishop to c5. The idea of playing bishop c5 that if in this position, if white tries to push the pawn, black can simply go for capturing the pawn, followed by capturing the bishop, and in this position black is the one who is better. So playing a5 doesn't make any, doesn't make any sense. So here white simply gave a check, and after king h7 simply captured the bishop. Capturing the bishop with the pawn would have been a slightly much better move because it gives white the two passed pawns. And in this position, if black tries to capture the bishop, I can play c6, rook into e1 check, king g2, and if black tries to play rook a1 hitting the pawn, I can simply push the pawn to c7. You cannot capture the pawn, I can simply play rook to h8 check, king takes, and I can simply make a queen. And the rook is attacked, and it's winning for white. So in this position, if black tries to play knight to d6 hitting the rook, I can still play rook d8 hitting the knight, and after rook into a6, I can simply capture the knight, rook into d6 making a queen, and it's winning for white. So this is what happens if white tries to capture the pawn, but white simply captured the bishop with the rook, which is still winning. We have rook into d1, rook to a5, and now stopping the queen is impossible for black. So we have rook into e1, king g2, rook to e2, and now we have a7. So here after rook into f2 check, king g1, rook to d2, and after making queen, everyone thought that even if black tries to resign the position, there is no harm because white is already having a queen. And in the exchange of queen, we can say that black is having a knight and also a pawn. So resigning this position is very common. But what Hans thought was knight e4 cannot be attacked by any pawn because there are no pawns to attack the knight. And second, black position is actually very solid. Black can protect the f7 pawn, which is the only weakness for black, by playing rook f2 or king g6, and black is safe. So there is no directly losing for black. Yeah, so he tried to continue the position by giving a check. King g2, and now we have another check. So here you cannot repeat the position because white is better. So making a draw doesn't make any sense. You can't even go for playing king h3 or king g3, king f3 because knight g5 is already draw for black or white. Because after king g4 I can simply play rook to f2, a very nice move, and now f5 threats are already going to come up. So white came up with the only move king f1, trying to sacrifice the pawn and just running away from the draw. Rook into h2, queen to b8. So idea is to play rook to 8 and some back rank issues. We gave a check, king to e1, and now we have rook to f3, hitting the pawn and hitting the second pawn. So white tries to play king e2, hitting the rook and also protecting the e3 pawn, because sacrificing the g3 pawn doesn't harm for white, but giving up the e3 pawns means a lot for white. Yeah, so defending the e3 pawn is much situation for white. We have rook f2 check and king e1, and again rook f3. So Hans is like, okay, I'm fine with the draw, but white wants to win the game. We have rook to a3, and here black simply captured the g3 pawn. Queen to b5, and now in this position black tries to push his pawn because he's having the pass pawn. So basically now we have like a 3 pawn and a knight for the queen. Yeah, basically 6 points for the 9 points. Yeah, so white is still 3 points up. We have a check, king h6, rook to a2, knight to f5 hitting the pawn. We have rook to e2, and now we have h4, simply pushing his h pawn. We have queen d2, and now we have g5. So black is having the 2 passed pawns and he's pushing both the pawns. So white is still better. White is still winning the position, but there is no direct win. That is the problem. We have king d1. At the place of playing king d1, a much better move would have been to play queen g4 or queen f5. Basically trying to infiltrate in the black area by playing queen d8 or queen a8. Some back rank issues. But sorry about that. But after g5 we have king to d1, and now we have h3 by black. So black is like, I'm going to simply push because there is no other thing black can do. We have rook f2, and trading the rook in this position is very wrong for black because now it's completely winning for white. So he simply played rook to g3, keeping the rooks on the board, and here white captured the knight on f5. Yeah, definitely capturing the knight looks very tempting because with the help of the knight, black was able to reach so far. So, and the knight definitely looks very annoying because attacking the pawn on e3 doesn't make any sense. But at the place of capturing the knight, a much better move was to play queen to b4, just coming up with the queen on f8, perhaps on b8, and some ideas. But capturing the knight was wrong. It's still a drawish position now. We have a check, and now black captured the rook. You cannot give a check in this position because now rook f2 is winning. So we have e into f5, and now it's an drawish position for both the sides because now white can no longer win the position. But still, white is the one who is going to face trouble in the position to make a draw because black idea is to simply make a queen. So now you can say that the tides have completely turned over from the white side to the black side. We have king f3, which turned out to be the blunder. And in this position, here's my question, that feel free to pause the video and try to find the only move for black to win the position. There's the only single move. So try to find the combination of moves for black. Okay, so I think that you must have, finding this move was incredibly hard. But all those who found f4, congratulations, kudos to you for finding this incredible move. The idea of playing f4 was, first of all, playing g4 looks the most natural move in this position, but after king f4 there is no direct, nothing is happening actually. Yeah, because white is having the f4 square. So after playing f4, basically now black idea is to play rook g3, capture the pawn. So white is actually forced to capture the pawn, but in this position I can push the pawn, and now there is no square for the king to run away on f4. So white is forced to play king to e3, and now I can simply give a check. King is forced to go on the second rank, and another check, and black wins the queen, and it's completely winning for black. So this was the idea, but definitely a very hard idea to find. So Hans was unable to find it, and he played king h5, which makes the game drawish. And in this position, queen f2 makes the game equal, but we have queen h2, hitting the pawn, hitting the rook, but it turned out to be the blunder, because now we have simply checked by g4, king to f4, and now we have rook to g2, hitting the queen. Queen h1, and now we have king h4, queen to f1, trying to attack the pawn, come up with the queen, and now we simply have g3. So now black is the one who is winning this position completely. Now white is completely losing in this position. King e5, rook to f2, queen to c1, and now we have g2. And white tries to play e4, sacrificing a pawn so that it would open up the lines for the queen to give black the checks. But okay, Hans simply calculated everything, and he simply played rook f1, check, king g3, check, king h2, and after queen to d2, you cannot make the queen because the pawn is pinned. We simply have king h1, and after e3, there is a last try to capture the pawn, but we simply have h2 by black, and now black is simply going to make a queen, and it's completely winning for black. That is the reason on the move number 66, after playing h2, Milton Panzar with the white pieces resigned the game, and Hans Niemann simply turned over the tides, and he simply won the game. Fantastic game. I can't say that it was a fantastic game, but not losing the hopes to continue the game, because many players, you can say 90% after making a queen, they simply resign, but Hans didn't resign the position, and he continued the position, and he eventually won the position. So playing this, you can say, incredible game it actually gives every chess player a lesson that to never give up, never lose hope, and play till the very end. Play till you get checkmated. Okay, if you like this video, then make sure to like the video, and make sure to share this video with everyone, so that every player who just simply resigns in the position when they are just simply a piece down, they never do it again, and they try to play the game till the very end, because miracles happen. So just wait for the miracles, or you can say your hard work, never losing hope, never say die attitude, and simply play the game till the end. Okay, so I'm going to come up with these interesting videos like this. Make sure to subscribe the channel if you haven't done it, and I'm going to come up with these interesting videos like this. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.